seeds of the Master Creator, I believe we have the innate ability to create the world we like to see for ourselves. The creative realm is a space where we deconstruct our minds and challenge our thoughts to transcending conversations. My name is Moses, and I urge you to join me on this journey. Welcome to the Creative Realm Conversation Series. Welcome back to the second episode of the Creative Realm Conversation Series. If you're tuning in, meaning that you have made it to the second episode, you have listened to the first part, or you're just joining us, that's fine. Thank you for tuning in. And I was told with my first episode that I was speaking maybe too fast, so I need to tame it down a bit with the second episode. I think maybe it was the nerves and the excitement from the first one. Finally, I'm getting to do this. Finally, it's happening. I think maybe that's what you hear in my tone. But I think naturally I'm a fast talker in general, but I'll try to slow it down for this episode. For this particular topic, we are going to be in conversation about race and culture. For the most part, I want to keep this conversation series as unscripted as possible. To be honest, I have topics that I want to talk about. I can maybe have bullet points of what I would like to specifically talk about in these topics, subcategories, and I'll write them on my phone. So in case you see me scrolling through my phone, that's what I'm looking at or reminding myself. But for the most part, I want to keep it as unscripted as possible, because in conversations, you don't always prepare to have conversations. You just talk with people and you try to be as authentic and give your perspective, your opinions. And I would like to have that premise be just a continual thing in this conversation series or podcast, you might say. So we are in conversation about race and culture. And why am I speaking on race and culture? I think it's coming from my experience. From the first episode, I did touch on a little bit how I moved to America when I was about 17 to go study for my bachelor's degree. And that was my first encounter with race and the idea of what culture is and what culture means. Again, this is coming from one particular perspective. So I'm not saying that my experience or my thought processes is the main thing about race or culture, but this is just my own experience, and I hope that you guys can listen with an open heart and open mind. But I do think that there is a lot to be said about our relationship across the diaspora as Black people and how we relate to race and culture. I think there's been a lot of conversations happening about, the relationship between Black Americans and Africans and Caribbean people, Black British people. There's always some kind of misunderstanding that we have about each other, where we come from, and how we connect with each other. I would like to start by going to the origin story. I think I always talk about the first time that I realized that I was a Black person. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that you're watching a dark-skinned Black man on your screens and you're wondering, what are you talking about? So when you are raised in Nigeria, or for those of us that are raised in the western part of Africa, we are raised in a part of the world where racism is non-existent. We don't grow up with this self-identity that is attached to the color of our skin. Now, don't get me wrong. We are a socialist society. We are a society that was colonized. So colorism is a thing in our country, which is a topic I'm going to dissect in one of my other episodes. And it's you're aware that you're dark skinned, but the race is not something that we take on as an identity in the way that our Black Americans do. So I remember coming to Nigeria, moving from Nigeria to America at 17, and that was the first time I became aware of the fact that I was Black as a race, that it meant something, and that what it means was so deep, and there were different layers attached to what it means to be a Black person, an identity that I wasn't aware of in any way whatsoever as a Nigerian. I think the first experience that really made me think, whoa, like what's happening here? Which is a very funny story when you think about it, because when you're raised in Nigeria, you have such an innocence towards race, because we were raised in a part of the world where everybody's black. You know, being black is the standard, being black is the norm. Racism is very obscured in our society. You don't grow up with that self-identity of blackness, or I'm black and I'm proud. It's just not a thing. So I remember in my freshman year of college, you know, as someone who was raised in a Pentecostal Christian home, when you move to a new place, the first thing you try to do is find a place of worship. You want to find a place of worship, a place of where you can commune with people, a church, or, you know, a fellowship or whatever. And there was this fellowship that was happening in my school. For context, I was in West Virginia. So for anyone who is American, for any black person who understands when I say I was going to school in West Virginia, can understand where this might be going to, because West Virginia is one of them countries that for the most part is mostly a red state, if I'm not mistaken. It's a very Republican and conservative state. So, and I was schooling in Charleston. I went to University of Charleston. So I joined the fellowship on campus that was led by a white preacher. And we had a good relationship to the point that he started inviting me to come to his church, because I was trying to find a church to go to, and, you know, he invited me to his church. So I started going to his church on Sundays. And, you know, me, like straight off the boat, like going to a church as a Pentecostal Christian, I'm in the front of the service, and my hands up in the air. I'm really, you know, praising and you know, doing praise and worship like a Nigerian would, like a Pentecostal would, like very carefree, very loud for the most part. And, you know, everybody's just kind of cool and calm and connected. But, you know, it didn't really mean that much to me. I'm just being myself. And I kept on going to this church. And one of my very good friends that I made during my freshman year, she is Ghanaian American. So she was born and raised in America, but her family is of Ghanaian descent. And so she understands culture in that way, and we're able to connect because, you know, she did live in Ghana for a little while. So we're able to connect to each other on that African perspective. So one time she was like, yo, where's this church you're always going to on Sundays? I was like, oh yeah, it's like this church that one of the pastors on campus invited me to go for, and that's where I've been going to worship. She was like, oh, she'd like to follow me to the church, you know, because she's also Christian. I was like, cool, let's go to church together. So we go to church together. We're sitting in front like I usually sit, and she sits next to me. And as the service is going on, she is so incredibly uncomfortable. And I'm like, why is she so uncomfortable? Like, is she not feeling the vibe of the church? Like, what's going? She's just so uncomfortable. And I remember, like, we sit back down after, you know, praise and worship and stuff. And I kind of lean next to her, like, yo, are you okay? Like, you just seem very uncomfortable. And she's like, yo, Moses, don't you realize we are the only black people up in here? And I'm like, no, there's no way. So many black people go to this church. I mean, so many. And I start like turning around and tilting my head. And I realize, yo, for the past how many months that I've been going to this church, I have been the only black person in that church. And I did not notice that I was the only black person in that church. I think I said that story to let you guys know how innocent we are as West Africans when it comes to race. Is that you're not even aware of race. Now that I've lived in America for so many years, when I walk into the room now, the first thing I notice is how many black people are in that room. I notice how many white people are in that room. I notice, like, race is such a thing that you carry. And it can be a bad and a good thing, because I don't think any other race of people have to deal with the burden of the color of their skin like black people. Like, we carry it with us. It's such a thing. It's such an identity thing. So my friend pointing out that, yo, she was so uncomfortable because we were the only black people in that church. And she could pick on every single thing. She could pick on the way people looked at her, the way people stared at her, the comments people might have made. And it made her so uncomfortable. And for me, because I was so ignorant about race, it wasn't even something that even occurred to me to pay attention to. So when she pointed out that we were the only niggas up in there, I was just like, okay, I guess this is an interest. I guess this is uncomfortable that we're the only black people here. But then the next Sunday, she didn't follow me to the church. I went to the church on my own. And this time around, I was very aware that I was a black person and the only black person in that church. And I started to pay attention to the way people would look at me, the way they would stare at me, the little, like silly things they would say. Like I remember there was this white couple. So it was an all white church. There was this white couple that adopted a black kid that they were raising. And after church that day, he came up to me and he said, "Oh, you're so black." And I deeped it. I dipped what he said. I was like, why is this kid who is also black telling me that I am so black? You know? And because he was light skinned, but he was also being raised. But you could tell he was black though. He wasn't like light skin that he was passing to be white. No, you could tell there was a black kid, but he was being raised with a white family. And he was so unaware of blackness. From his statement, I could tell that he could tell me that I was too black. So that experience made me so uncomfortable that I stopped going to that church. And shout out to Pastor Ron, because he's actually a very good pastor. He actually ended up baptizing me, and you know, we have a good relationship. We still keep in touch here and there. He and I have never had this conversation about why I stopped going to his church or like what happened. But for the most part, he was a great pastor. Like he had such an open arm to like welcome me into his church, and he was really nice to me and always made sure that I was good, because he knew I was from Nigeria. He always checked up on me and stuff. But I started to understand what it meant to be a black person and being aware of my race. So every time I walked into a room from then, I would always be aware of how many black people are in there or how many white. And that was the day that I realized that I was black. And I think that is such a pivotal experience in the way I started to understand race and culture. I think as the journey continued in America and experiencing race, I started to understand race differently. I always tell people, it doesn't matter how many books you read about race and racism. It doesn't matter if you have black friends, if you're married to a black person. If you do not experience race personally, your knowledge of it is always going to be limited. It's an objective reality. Only black people are objectified by race in that way. I know people of color. I don't want to say people of color because I don't like the term anymore, especially with this election that just passed in America in 2024. I think we as black people need to be more aware in the way we separate ourselves from this term people of color, because it just seems that we don't have allies in the way that we think we do. We are always the ones who welcome people with an open arm. We're always supportive of other groups, but it just seems like other groups of people don't really have our backs like that. So when we say people of color, I try to de-associate myself with that. It's black. We are black people. Every other person of color can be categorized however they want to be, because I just don't think that there's a united front for us to be put as people of color. They are not allies in the way that we think they are towards us, and this presidential election clearly shows that. So as a black person, if you don't experience race as a black person, your knowledge of it is very, very limited, because it's such an objective reality. So understanding this and dissecting the nuances that is attached to race, I think there's also this thing that as a Nigerian, when we come to America, it's so easy for us to buy into the negative stereotypes that American culture propagates about black people. So for example, as Nigerians, we are raised in a culture where we're supposed to be the best. You're supposed to be very intelligent, go to school, have an education, you know, don't follow bad friends, don't be in a gang, don't do this, don't do that. Like you're supposed to be, our parents raised us to have such a clean record in our lives, to be good and to be great and exceptional in everything that we do. But then when you come to America, the images that American culture propagates about people that are uneducated, the people that are criminals, the people that are a nuisance to the society, the images that American culture propagates are black people. So it's so easy for you as a non-black American to come to America and buy into these singular stories and stereotypes about black Americans. So you find yourself saying, well, I'm a different kind of black. I am not the kind of black that the American society defines. Don't even put me in that category. I do not want to be in the same vicinity as these black Americans, because me, I'm different. And I remember when people on campus would want to call me black, I would always correct them and say, I'm not black, I'm Nigerian. Like, don't put me in that category. I'm not the type of black that American society defines. I'm different. I am Nigerian. I am not black, because I am buying into these singular stories of blackness. And I think on the other side of this conversation, You look at Black Americans who are raised in a country where when they teach them their history, it always starts with slavery. It starts with the oppression of the people. But the Black American history doesn't start with that. It starts with who the people were before the oppression, and who they were Africans. They were Africans who had beautiful lives, rich lives, ways of living, building, communicating, ways of speaking. And they were building a society and a world for themselves before they were assaulted by colonization. But that is so seldom seen in the way history is taught to Black Americans. And for me, I even think that is a form of oppression. Because when you don't teach a group of people all of who they are, you're limiting them to really knowing themselves fully. So when you start the conversation with slavery, you're doing a disservice to the Black American. And I think in America in general, there is a very ignorant way of thinking when it comes to world affairs. Americans, with no disrespect, are incredibly ignorant about things outside of America. So the level of questions I would receive as an African about, oh, were you raised in the village? Were you raised next to monkeys and lions? Or like, did you climb I remember like lying to my classmates in school that to go to the market in Nigeria, I would climb on top of an elephant and I'll tell the elephant to take me to the market square. And these motherfuckers believed it. They believed that I was telling. They believed like they are watching like movies like Tarzan, and they think that we're all just swinging from the ropes like Tarzan and going to and they believed stuff like that. And I'll be like, are you guys serious? Like, first of all, I come from like a middle class Nigerian family. Like, my life is so farther away from me being in a village or like climbing an elephant to go to the market square. Do you understand? But they have such singular stereotypes of how they see us as Africans that it's so easy for them to buy into these stereotypical ideas of us, where they don't see us as human equals, or they don't see our equal humanity. So when you add this American ignorance to it, and then you add this level of teaching history to Black Americans, then they also have a lack of knowledge about who we are as Africans. And I think that that is the biggest thing that has plagued us when it comes to our relationship as Black people across the diaspora. The biggest thing, honestly, is that we are not knowledgeable about the next person. We are not fully knowledgeable about the next person. We have stereotypical ideas of who we think the other person is, or we have these ideas of what the media or what somebody else have told us about this group of people, and then we de-associate with ourselves. It's so difficult to have a good relationship with somebody that you're not knowledgeable about. You cannot really be in relation with someone that you don't fully know. So our biggest issue is education, is a lack of knowledge of the other. If we were able to teach Nigerians about race in the way that we could just have a knowledge of an understanding, our level of empathy towards the struggle of Black Americans would be heightened. And if African Americans were taught about Africans and giving them like a huge knowledge and history of who we are, I think their knowledge about us will also be different. Now, don't get me wrong, things have changed over the years now. Like, we are a very digital world. Like, I think stuff with social media has helped. I think that the tide for me as a Black person living in America, I think the tide changed, honestly, after Black Panther. And I know that you would say like really Black Panther, but honestly, yes, the movie Black Panther. And I think that this is one of those typical stories that you can see the power of cinema, the power of storytelling. I think Black Panther was the first time that I saw Black Americans have such pride about being attached to the continent. And I think for them, what Black Panther did was that it gave them like this reimagination of attaching themselves to a continent where there was no shame attached to it, where there was no guilt attached to it. And it's mostly shame that is the word. So Black Panther gave us a reimagination of Africa that was not tainted with the assault of colonization. It gave us this reimagination of Africa that discovered itself by itself, on its own, by its own terms, by Africans. Do you understand? And I think that it gave African Americans this willful, feeling to just want to attack. I mean, we saw like Black Americans wearing dashiki shirts, going to the cinema. Everybody was like painting themselves with African tribal things. Everybody was Wakanda forever. Like, I had never seen that level of African pride in Black Americans. Like, growing up in growing up in America, like when I moved to America at 17, like I would have conversations with my African American friends who some of them didn't even want to be called African American because they'll be like, yo, well, my mother is from Atlanta, like my dad is from Ohio, like why do I have to be called African American? Like I should just be American, like I've never been to Africa before and all that jazz. And I could understand, you know, when they would say stuff like that, but at the same time I was like, man, like this is such a part of who you are. Like you, there's something that Burna Boy's mom said when she got on stage to receive his BET award. She was like, yo, you were African first before you were anything else. And is that such a powerful thing? When you look at us across the diaspora, we were Africans before we were anything else. Like that is the number one thing that connects us as Black people across the diaspora, is that our origin story starts from one place. It starts from the continent. So when you think about that relationship, I think that the number one thing that we have to think of is that lack of knowledge and how we can really connect to each other when it comes to our relationships as Black people and Black people across the diaspora. My friend in college, my very good friend, he was an African American guy, and he would always used to say stuff about race that I did not understand because, like, I just had moved to America, so there was so much learning for me to do, like so much learning for me to do. He would always talk about how, like, he would say, yo, Moses, man, when they created the world, they put a Black man on the top of the mountain and they put a white man on top of the mountain, and then they let the white man go all the way down. Once the white man was all the way down, then the Black man was allowed to come down, and we have been catching up to white people for years and we cannot catch up to them. And I'll be telling him, like, yo, it's about the way you're thinking, man. Like, you have to elevate your thought process. Like, don't be a victim. Like, don't say stuff like that. You have to change. But now that I've become knowledgeable about race, I'm like, yo, I've had to apologize to him. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. They definitely started white people and Black people on the same platform. They let the white person go all the way down. And yes, we have been trying to catch up with them for years. For, like, we don't understand the level of catastrophe that colonization has caused and how it was literally built to set white people up for success. Like these systems, and that is the thing, is the systems in place. Is a system in place that really stops us from meeting up or catching up to them. And it's not a thing about playing victims. When Black Americans talk about race, it's not a thing about playing victims. It's just the truth. Is the truth of the conversation is that there is a level of discrimination that Black Americans have to constantly go through to be able to be successful. You have to work twice as hard just to get the same accolades as them. And sometimes you work twice as hard and you don't get the same accolades. You have to work twice as hard to get the promotions. You have to play the game. Like, the level of, it's just incredibly nuanced and deep. And I don't think that we fully understand these nuances that are attached to the conversation. And it's so easy for us to come together and we are disconnected because we're not allowing ourselves to be empathetic towards the other person's story, to be empathetic to the other person's walk of life. Black people are not, I always say that we are not monotomatic. There's no one particular way of being Black. Even in our Blackness, we're very colorful. Like, culture is such a diverse thing. Like, we as Africans have a particular culture. Black British people have a particular culture. Black Caribbean people have a particular culture. Black Americans even have a particular culture. I know that sometimes I see a lot of jokes about how Black Americans don't have culture. I'm like, no, they do. And to be honest, Black American culture is the biggest export in America. Think about it. Everybody, like, from the fashion, from hip-hop music, from culture. Like, listen, pop culture is created by Black Americans. Nothing moves without Black Americans. They are literally the ones that create the trends. They create what's popular. They create what we recreate. Like, they have been able to build a culture for themselves after being taken away from their origin place. And I don't think that's something we give them enough credit for. To be able to come to a new land with no relation to this land, and to be able to build from there, and to literally be the pioneers of America, to be the pioneers, to set the trends. We think about, like, the amazing musical artists that have come from America, from the Michael Jacksons to the James Browns to the Tina Turners to the Beyoncés and down to just hip hop culture in general. You see the way that they have created for themselves and the way they have built for themselves. It's such an admirable thing to admire and to see. So when people say they don't have culture, they have culture, and their culture is the biggest export in America, and we don't give them credit for that. And I think that these are part of the conversations I want to dissect when it comes to race and when it comes to blackness in general. I think being black is such a beautiful and powerful thing. Unfortunately, there's a lot of unlearning that we have to do as black people, and we have to relearn the truth about who we really are. I'm going to dissect that a bit more in my next episode when I talk about colorism and how that has affected us as a people. I think that we have to understand that there is a connection that we have as black people across the diaspora that goes deeper than what we even see and what we know. I think that there's a level of empathy that we need to have as black people across the diaspora throughout our stories and understanding, so that we can connect with each other. To be honest, the reason why they teach history the way they do is because they know how powerful we are. And they know that once we get that knowledge about who we are unstoppable. See, the thing about us is that we are stronger together than separated. And when I talked about social media a little bit, I was talking about how like things have changed now in a way where I see, for example, now like when we go to Africa for like Dirty December, like our African American friends are seeing how Africans are living in Nigeria, living in Ghana. They're like, yo, like you guys are living such rich, beautiful lives. They're able to see a different side of Africa that the media doesn't show them in America. You know, if I was raised in America, I think my perspective about Africans will still be, we're dying, we're poor, we're fighting meaningless wars, we don't know how to build for ourselves and all that jazz. But like social media has been changing these things, and we see how people's perspective has changed over time, and we are building for ourselves. But I do think that we can only keep growing when we allow ourselves to be knowledgeable about the next person and to live with a level of empathy. We are way much stronger together than we are separately. I tell my African American friends, like if I'm driving, you know, in America and the police stops me, if I show them my Nigerian passport, they don't treat me differently. Like, we're still niggas to these people. So if them are still seeing us as all black, we need to have a united front. So when our black American brothers are saying Black Lives Matter, we also say Black Lives Matter, because it affects all of us. There's no experience that is unique to them that will be different to us as black people that live in the Western world, because we are going to deal with the same level of racism, the same level of discrimination, and the same level of heartache when it comes to building for our lives. So these are like the nuances and the conversation and parts of the conversations that I want us to be able to open our minds to and have elevated thoughts and conversations about. At some point, I would like to have an African American come in and give me their perspective of how they see how we can elevate our relationships as black people across the diaspora, and their own perspective of how they see the African and how we can deal with that. So I think that this probably is a conversation that needs maybe part 2 or part 3, but I think I just wanted to start this particular series, this particular episode, talking about race and culture. It's incredibly diverse and nuanced, and there's so many levels I can go. I'm sure there's so much that I haven't said, but when I listen to it, I would want to know what I missed out and what I would like to say even further. So I think we'll just call this like a part 1 for race and culture, and then we'll get into like part 2 and 3 later on, and hopefully get a guest. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you guys, and I'll see you at the next episode.